In a quiet suburb of Philadelphia, in November of 1989, an unusual event unfolded in the home of the Christenson family. Kevin Christenson, a 2-year-old boy who had been completely healthy before, suddenly became severely ill. The parents, John and Patricia Christenson, watched in horror as their son's condition deteriorated hour by hour. They rushed him to the local hospital, where doctors diagnosed leukemia, an aggressive form of this merciless disease that particularly attacks children. Kevin's treatment began immediately. Chemotherapy, radiation therapy, countless medical interventions followed. The little boy's body grew weaker and weaker, though his spirit remained strong. The parents woke up every morning with the prayer that perhaps today things would be better. But the leukemia was merciless. Kevin's body gradually gave up the fight. During the progression of the disease, strange things happened to Kevin's body. A lump appeared on his neck, which grew larger and larger. The doctors performed a biopsy in this area, and the procedure left a long, straight scar on his neck, precisely above the right cervical line. Later, when the disease spread further, another biopsy was needed, this time in the area around the left eye, where another focus of cancer cells appeared. Patricia Christenson remembered those moments when her son lay in bed, weak and pale, but still with that special light in his eyes that lives in children, even in the midst of the greatest suffering. She said, "Kevin was always strong. Even when the pain was unbearable, he tried to smile at us. He knew we were worried about him, and he didn't want us to be sad." In 1990, in mid-February, when the winter wind still swept through the streets of Philadelphia, Kevin's condition became critical. The doctors did everything they could, but the leukemia was too strong. One Monday morning, when the sun was just rising over the city, Kevin Christenson quietly passed away in his parents' arms. He was only 2.5 years old. The grief that struck the Christenson family was so deep it could barely be put into words. John and Patricia felt an emptiness that engulfs every parent who loses a child. Their home, which had previously been filled with Kevin's laughter and play, now became eerily silent. Every corner, every object reminded them of the one who was no longer among them. Patricia later said, "There were moments when I felt I couldn't continue. I couldn't imagine how to live on without Kevin being with us. But then something strange happened that changed everything." About 8 months after Kevin's death, Patricia realized she was pregnant again. The news evoked mixed feelings in the family. Of course, it was joy that new life was coming, but at the same time, a deep fear whether this new child would be healthy. Kevin's illness had wounded them so deeply that it was difficult to believe that fate could be favorable to them again. In August of 1991, Patrick Christenson was born. The parents were immediately relieved when they saw that the baby was healthy, but then they noticed something that immediately astonished them. On Patrick's neck, exactly where Kevin's scar from the biopsy had been, there was a long, straight birthmark. This was not an ordinary skin mark. It had exactly the same shape and location as Kevin's scar. Dr. Ian Stevenson, who later documented Patrick's case in detail, wrote about this. The position and shape of the birthmark corresponded stunningly, precisely to the scar that remained on Kevin's neck after the biopsy. The match was not merely approximate, but anatomically precise. But that wasn't all. When Patrick got a little older, the parents noticed that there was also an unusual mark around his left eye. A small, thin, slanted birthmark ran exactly in the area where Kevin had his second biopsy. The probability that a child would randomly have two such specific birthmarks in places that exactly correspond to a previous sibling's scars, is astronomically small. John Christenson, who was initially skeptical about anything that went beyond scientific explanations, nevertheless pondered this. He said, "When I first saw these marks on Patrick, a chill ran down my spine. I couldn't explain it. I tried to find a logical explanation, but there wasn't one." Share this video with your friends if you're interested in Patrick's incredible story, and write in the comments what you think about these inexplicable coincidences. As Patrick grew, the parents noticed more strange things. When he was about 4.5 years old, he started talking about things he shouldn't have known. One day he said to his mother, "Do you remember when I was in the hospital? When the doctors did things to my neck?" Patricia froze. Patrick had never been in a hospital, but Kevin had. Patrick began talking about the hospital bed, the white walls, the doctors in white coats who constantly came and went. He talked about how his neck hurt and that he was scared. He spoke with such detail that was unusual for a small child, and which unmistakably referred to Kevin's hospital stay. Dr. Jim Tucker, who continued Stevenson's work at the University of Virginia, studied Patrick's case in detail. He said, "Patrick's accounts were not general stories. They contained specific details about Kevin's treatment, things the family never discussed at home, and which Patrick could not have known through normal means." Patrick once said, "Do you remember that orange-brown car that Grandpa had? I drove that too." The family was stunned. Kevin had indeed driven Grandpa's old orange-brown car when they took him on their lap and let him hold the steering wheel while they slowly rolled around the parking lot. This was such a small detail that the family rarely talked about, and Patrick simply couldn't have known it. One of the most interesting aspects of modern reincarnation research is the connection between birthmarks and congenital abnormalities with injuries suffered in previous lives. Dr. Stevenson documented more than 2,000 cases where children's birthmarks or physical characteristics matched injuries they allegedly suffered in their previous lives. Patrick's case perfectly illustrates this pattern. During his work, Dr. Stevenson found that in approximately 30% of cases, the connection with previous injuries could be supported by medical documentation. In Patrick's case, the locations of the biopsies were precisely documented in Kevin's medical files, and these perfectly matched Patrick's birthmarks. But what could be the explanation? How is it possible that a physical injury in one life carries over to the physical body of the next life? This question is one of the greatest mysteries of modern science. Dr. Bruce Grayson, professor of psychiatry at the University of Virginia, stated, "If consciousness is truly independent of the brain and survives death, then perhaps it is capable of carrying some information that influences the development of the new body in the embryonic stage." The latest research in quantum biology offers new perspectives. According to Dr. Stuart Hameroff and Sir Roger Penrose, consciousness is a quantum-level phenomenon that is not limited to the physical brain. If this is true, then it is conceivable that certain information, including traumatic physical experiences, is stored at the quantum level and can be transferred from one body to another. Patricia Christenson recalled those years when Patrick was still small. "There was something in Patrick's behavior that reminded me of Kevin. Not just the memories, but certain gestures, the way he smiled, how he reacted to certain things, as if Kevin was somehow inside Patrick." Patrick once, when he was 6 years old, said to his mother, "You know, when I died, you cried. You were very sad. But now I'm here again, so you don't have to be sad anymore." Patricia burst into tears. How could a 6-year-old child speak so sensitively about death and rebirth unless he had experienced something similar? One of the most astonishing moments came when the family visited the hospital where Kevin had received his treatment. Patrick, who had never been there before, suddenly became restless. When they entered the building, Patrick immediately recognized the corridors. He said, "This is the place. I don't want to come back here." The parents saw real fear in his eyes, as if a deep, suppressed memory was surfacing. Dr. Tucker explains this phenomenon as follows. Traumatic memories are particularly deeply imprinted in consciousness. If these memories can truly be transferred from one life to another, then it is understandable that certain places or situations trigger immediate emotional reactions. Patrick's reaction in the hospital was not learned behavior, but a spontaneous, emotional response to a deep memory. Modern neurology shows that traumatic experiences are stored not only in conscious memory, but also at the cellular level of the body. This is so-called somatic memory. Some researchers believe that if consciousness truly survives death, then these somatic memories may also be transferable and can influence the development and reactions of the new body. Patrick's case is particularly strong evidence because it's not just about memories, but also about concrete physical signs. During his work, Dr. Stevenson documented hundreds of similar cases worldwide where birthmarks exactly corresponded to previous injuries. Statistical analyses show that these coincidences far exceed randomness. As Patrick grew, his memories gradually faded, which is typical for most reincarnation cases. Around the age of 7 or 8, he talked about these things less often. According to Dr. Tucker, this is normal. Children's brains are particularly receptive to these memories until about age 6. As the brain matures and new memories accumulate, memories of the previous life gradually become isolated and inaccessible. But even if the memories faded, Patricia and John Christenson knew that something extraordinary had happened. They said, "Patrick gave us what we lost when we lost Kevin." I'm not saying that Patrick is Kevin. He's his own unique personality. But somehow a part of Kevin's essence is in Patrick, and that gives us comfort. One of the most important questions in reincarnation research is what the relationship is between the reborn soul and the new personality. Is truly the same person reborn, or is it rather a continuity of consciousness that takes a new form in each life? Dr. Stevenson formulated it this way. I don't think there's a simple answer to this. Perhaps both are true in a certain sense. Patrick is not Kevin, but something from Kevin's consciousness. A part of his memories and experiences lives in Patrick's personality. According to Buddhist philosophy, rebirth is not like when one candle is lit from another candle. The new flame is not the same as the old one, but it is somehow its continuation. This metaphor perhaps helps understand the relationship between Patrick and Kevin. Patrick is a new life, a new personality, but still carries something of Kevin's essence. Modern psychology increasingly recognizes that consciousness is much more complex than we previously thought. Dr. Andrew Newberg, who studies the neurological basis of spiritual experiences, stated, "Human consciousness is not limited to the physical brain. More and more evidence suggests that consciousness somehow transcends the brain and is connected to something larger, a universal consciousness network." Dr. Pim van Lommel, the Dutch cardiologist who researched near-death experiences, also believes that consciousness is independent of the brain. He said, "During near-death experiences, people often report that they had full consciousness when their brain was clinically dead. This suggests that consciousness is not a product of the brain, but something that uses the brain but survives its death. Patrick's story also raises the question of why some souls are reborn in the same family. Is there some unresolved emotional connection that pulls them back? Or is the bond of love simply so strong that even death cannot break it? Patricia Christenson explained it this way: "I feel that Kevin didn't want to leave us. He loved the family, and although his body gave up the fight, his soul somehow returned." Patrick's birth was not an accident. It's Kevin's gift to us, to show that love is stronger than death. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss similar fascinating cases that can transform your view of the world. According to Hindu and Buddhist traditions, the soul has karmic connections that bind it from one life to another to certain people. These connections can be positive or negative, but they are strong and lasting. The connection between Patrick and Kevin perhaps points to such a karmic bond that transcends one life. Dr. Erlendur Haraldsson, the Icelandic psychologist who examined many reincarnation cases, stated, "Rebirths within families are particularly interesting because they show that the soul does not randomly choose its new body. There is some attraction that brings them back to the people they previously loved." Patrick's case is particularly strong because there are not only memories, but also concrete physical evidence. The two birthmarks that exactly mirror Kevin's injuries are evidence that is difficult to ignore. According to Dr. Tucker's statistical analysis, the probability of such coincidences is more than 1,000,000 to 1. Skeptics naturally question the credibility of such stories. They argue that parents' subconscious expectations can influence the child's behavior, or that birthmarks are purely random. Philosopher Paul Edwards stated, "Even if these children truly know things they shouldn't know, it doesn't automatically prove reincarnation." There may be other explanations, such as telepathy, genetic memory, or unconscious information transfer. However, Dr. Stevenson worked with extremely thorough methods. In Patrick's case, he not only interviewed the family, but also obtained Kevin's medical documentation and had independent experts verify the match between the birthmarks and the scars. He examined every possible alternative explanation and ultimately concluded that reincarnation is the most likely explanation. Modern science is slowly beginning to open up to these phenomena. More and more doctors and researchers are willing to take reincarnation cases seriously and examine them with scientific methods. Dr. Tucker's work continues at the University of Virginia, where several thousand cases have been documented and analyzed. Professor Tucker stated, "We're not saying we have complete proof of reincarnation, but we can say that these cases show phenomena that the current scientific paradigm cannot satisfactorily explain. This encourages us to expand scientific thinking and consider new possibilities." Patrick's story also shows how the idea of reincarnation can help in processing grief. For Patricia and John, Patrick's birth and behavior provided reassurance. They felt that Kevin had somehow remained with them, and this helped them overcome the deep pain of loss. Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the pioneer of grief research, who herself believed in the afterlife, said, "Death is not the end, but a transition." Parents who have lost their child often find comfort in the thought that their loved ones continue to live in some form. This is not denial, but hope that helps one survive. Patricia Christenson said, "There were very difficult moments when I felt I would go mad with pain. But when Patrick started talking about things that Kevin knew, and when I saw those marks on his body, something changed in me. I realized that Kevin didn't disappear completely. In some way, he is here with us. Reincarnation cases often draw attention to the fact that death is not as frightening as we think. If consciousness truly survives physical death and continues in new forms, then death is not an end, but a transition to a new beginning. This thought can provide deep comfort to those who have lost someone. Dr. Raymond Moody, who was a pioneer in the research of near-death experiences, said, "The idea of survival after death is not new. It has been present in all cultures and in all ages. But now, with the tools of modern science, we have begun to document and examine these phenomena, and we are finding more and more evidence that something truly survives physical death." Patrick's story also reminds us that love is the strongest force in the universe. Kevin's love for his family was so strong that even death could not break it. This love somehow brought him back in the form of Patrick to continue the relationship that was so suddenly interrupted. Modern physics, especially quantum mechanics, offers new perspectives for understanding these phenomena. According to quantum physicist Dr. Amit Goswami, consciousness is the primary reality, not matter. He says, "Matter is the condensation of consciousness." If this is true, then it is understandable that consciousness survives the death of the physical body, because consciousness is more fundamental than matter. As Patrick grew, he increasingly formed his own personality. He was not a copy of Kevin, but his own unique human being with his own interests, abilities, and dreams. But those who knew both boys often noticed small similarities in their behavior, expressions, or the way they related to certain things. John Christenson said, "Patrick is different from what Kevin was. He's calmer, more thoughtful. But there are moments when I see his smile or how he tilts his head, and in those moments Kevin comes back, as if both our sons were in this one child." One of the most important lessons of reincarnation research is that identity is not as simple and one-dimensional as we usually assume. Perhaps we are not single, isolated beings who live one life and then cease to exist. Perhaps we are much more complex, continuities that flow from one life to another, changing, but still maintaining something fundamental that defines us. Dr. David Chalmers, one of the leading figures in the philosophy of consciousness, formulated it this way: "The problem of personal identity is one of the oldest and most difficult questions in philosophy. If reincarnation truly exists, then we must completely rethink our theories about personality and identity. Perhaps human identity is not limited to one life, but continues through a series of lives." Patrick's story, like many similar cases around the world, encourages us to remain open. We don't necessarily have to accept reincarnation as dogma, but it is worth taking these phenomena seriously and continuing to research them. Science advances when it is willing to face data that doesn't fit into existing theories. Dr. Stevenson's work, which Professor Tucker continues, fundamentally changed the debate about reincarnation. It is no longer just a religious or philosophical question, but has become a subject of empirical research that collects and analyzes concrete cases, medical documentation, and testimonies. This work helps bridge the gap between science and spirituality. The final question that Patrick's story raises is, what is the purpose of life? If we truly are born again and again, why? What are we supposed to learn? What is the path we walk life after life? According to spiritual traditions, every life is a learning opportunity. Every rebirth gives us a chance to grow, develop, and come closer to perfection or enlightenment. Kevin's life was short, but it had a profound impact on his family. Patrick's life, which is perhaps Kevin's continuation, gives another opportunity for the family to continue and grow together. Patricia Christenson's last words perhaps best summarize what this extraordinary story teaches us. Kevin taught us that love is stronger than death. Patrick teaches us that life continues even when it seems to have ended. I cannot prove that Patrick is truly Kevin's reborn soul. But what I do know is that when I look into Patrick's eyes, sometimes I see Kevin's eyes, and that is enough for me to believe. Love is eternal, and we never lose those we truly love.